Life at 32 wasn't quite what I'd pictured. Working as a dentist in a bustling clinic, you'd think I had it all sorted. But behind the professional smiles and polished veneers of my day-to-day, my personal life was fraying at the edges. Ethan and I, Kelly, we'd been hitched for 8 solid years. 8 years that felt both like a blink and a lifetime, especially now that the warmth had seeped out of our marriage, leaving a chill I couldn't shake. We never had kids, not that we didn't try. It just never happened for us, and lately, that felt like less of a disappointment and more like a dodged bullet. My dad's death hit me like a freight train when I was just a kid, leaving me and Mom to fend for ourselves. She was my rock, my safe harbor in every storm. Now, she was the one needing protection, holed up in a rehab center fighting her own battles. I visited her every chance I got, pouring out my worries and fears about Ethan and the gaping rift between us. "He's just not the same, Mom," I confessed during one of those visits, the sterile scent of the center mingling with my unease. "It's like I'm living with a stranger. He's distant, cold even. I don't know what I did wrong." Mom, frail yet fierce as ever, pulled me into a hug that felt like home. "Honey, you've done nothing wrong. People change, and sometimes, not for the better. Remember, I'm here for you, no matter what. Even if you think divorce is the answer, I'll stand by you." Her words were a balm, but they couldn't quite heal the growing wound in my heart. The change in Ethan was like night and day. I reminisced about the man I fell in love with, the one who'd surprised me with midnight picnics and lazy Sunday drives. Now, getting him to share a meal at the table felt like an achievement. Our conversations had turned into monologues, with me playing the lead and Ethan the disinterested audience. "Babe, can we talk? It feels like you're miles away lately," I'd say, trying to bridge the distance. "Yeah, sure. Just let me finish this thing for work," he'd reply, his eyes never leaving the screen of his laptop. But later never came. It was always some project, some deadline that kept him tethered to that damn computer and miles away from our marriage. Mom saw right through me, the worry lines etched deep in my face mirroring her own. "Life's too short, darling. You deserve happiness, with or without him. Don't forget that." Her words echoed in my mind long after our visits. Ethan's transformation from the loving partner, who'd once held me through the night during my darkest times, to this indifferent shadow of a man was baffling. It wasn't just the absence of laughter or the dwindling conversations. It was the lack of interest in anything that concerned me or us. My achievements at the clinic, once celebrated with champagne, now went unnoticed. My worries, once soothed by his words, now lingered in the air between us, unaddressed. I couldn't help but wonder where it all went wrong. Was it the pressure of our unspoken grief over not having children? Or had Ethan simply fallen out of love with me, leaving his body beside me as his heart wandered off somewhere I couldn't reach? The more I pondered, the more I realized how much I leaned on Mom's strength and wisdom. She was my guiding light in the fog that my marriage had become. And as I watched her battle her own demons with a grace I admired, I knew I had to find the strength to face mine. Whether Ethan was by my side or not, I was determined to find my way back to happiness, with Mom's unwavering support lighting the path ahead. That morning, the call came like a bolt from the blue. The voice on the other end, too clinical, too detached, informed me my world had just crumbled. "I'm sorry to tell you, your mother passed away early this morning," the nurse said, her voice a flat note in the cold symphony of my despair. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The tears came hard and fast, a torrent of grief that I couldn't stem. Through the blur, I dialed Ethan, my voice a cracked whisper of the devastation rocking me. "Ethan, it's Mom, she's gone," I managed to get out between sobs. There was a pause, a silence that stretched too long. "Oh, Kelly. Is that all? What about the inheritance stuff? Did they say anything?" Ethan's voice was cold, distant, as if he was talking about a stranger's misfortune, not the death of the woman who'd been like a mother to him too. I felt a punch in the gut. Seriously? That's your first question? My mom just died, Ethan. Look, Kelly, I'm slammed at work. Can we talk about this later? Maybe tonight? His voice was as cold as ice, not a drop of sympathy or love. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't focus on my patients, couldn't stop the tears, couldn't believe my mom was gone. And Ethan? His reaction kept replaying in my mind, adding salt to an open wound. Home didn't feel like home that evening. It felt like I was walking into a negotiation, not a place of love and comfort. Ethan was there, all right, looking as if he was gearing up for a board meeting rather than comforting his grieving wife. So, about your mom's passing? He started, no preamble. It's sad, yeah, but we need to think about the future. This could be good for us, financially speaking. I stared at him, disbelief and anger mingling with my grief. Good for us? My mom just died, and all you can think about is money? What happened to you, Ethan? Where's the guy I married? He shrugged, a gesture so dismissive it stung. I'm being realistic. We've got to look at the big picture here. Life goes on, and this inheritance could really help us out. That's when it hit me. The man standing in front of me was a stranger, his words slicing through the last threads of what I thought our marriage was. I missed my mom more than ever, not just for her loss, but for the absence of her guidance in this moment of utter disbelief and betrayal. How can you be so heartless? I asked, the fight draining out of me. My world is shattered, and you're counting cash. Ethan didn't blink. Life's tough, Kelly. Best get used to it. We'll talk more when you're thinking clearly. About the will, I mean. I realized then and there, no amount of money, no inheritance, could fill the void my mother's passing had left, nor could it bridge the chasm between Ethan and me. This was more than loss, it was a revelation of true colors, a beacon of how alone I truly was in my grief. The day of my mom's funeral was a storm of emotions, a whirlwind of grief and disbelief swirling inside me. The ceremony was set, a final goodbye to the woman who'd been my everything. Family, friends, even folks from the clinic where I worked, they all showed up, their faces etched with sorrow and support. But Ethan, my husband, was nowhere to be seen. As the service went on, whispers began to circulate. Where's Ethan? Isn't that her husband's seat empty? The absence of my supposed life partner at such a critical moment was a glaring, painful hole in the proceedings. I could feel the pitying glances, the unspoken questions. I stepped out, needing a moment, and dialed Ethan, my hands trembling with a cocktail of rage and despair. Where are you? The service is about to start, I said, my voice, barely above a whisper, choked with grief. I told you, I've got that big project deadline. I can't just drop everything. Ethan's voice was sharp, impatient. But it's my mom's funeral, Ethan. Can't your work wait for just one day? I could feel the tears threatening to spill over again, frustration mingling with sorrow. Look, I'm sorry, but this is important. We'll talk later, he said before hanging up, leaving me with a dial tone and a heart heavy with betrayal. Standing there, phone in hand, I felt the weight of his absence like a physical blow. The people who came to offer their condolences noticed it too, their whispered words a mixture of sympathy and disapproval. Where's Ethan, Kelly? Couldn't he make it? Aunt Clara asked, her brows knitting together in concern and something else, judgment, maybe. He's caught up with work, I replied, the lie bitter in my mouth. Couldn't get away. She shook her head, patting my hand with a sigh. You're too good for him, dear. The ceremony passed in a blur, each eulogy, each hymn, a reminder of the support I lacked from the one person who had vowed to be there through better or worse. The absence of my husband was a silent scream in the solemnity, his empty chair an echo of the void now in my life. After the burial, as I stood by my mother's final resting place, my cousin Michael approached, his expression a mix of anger and concern. Kelly, I can't believe you didn't show. If you need anything at all, We're here for you. Thanks, Mike. I just don't understand. It's like he's not the man I married, I confessed, the words tasting of salt and despair. He's a fool, and you deserve better, Michael said fiercely. Don't you forget that. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. Ethan didn't come home, didn't call. It was as if the funeral had been for our marriage too, not just for my beloved mother. Lying in our bed alone, I made a decision. No more excuses, no more waiting for things to get better. I couldn't be with someone who couldn't stand beside me in my darkest hour. But first, I needed to confront him, to say the words out loud. Only then could I start to heal, to rebuild from the ashes of my grief and a marriage I could no longer save. Ethan's absence at the funeral wasn't just a missed obligation, it was the final unraveling of our life together, a clear sign that it was time for me to find my path forward, alone. As dawn crept through the curtains, casting a pale light on the emptiness around me, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead, for the end of one chapter and the uncertain start of another. Since the beginning of our marriage, Ethan and I had one big dream, a home of our own, not just any home, but a place where we could grow together, maybe even raise a family. We'd sit on our cramped second-hand couch in the tiny apartment we rented, poring over house listings and dreaming of the day we'd have enough for a down payment. It's gonna be beautiful, babe. A big backyard, a kitchen with an island, room for the kids to play, Ethan would say, his eyes lighting up with every word. I believed in that dream just as much, imagining holiday dinners and a house filled with laughter. Fast forward to now, and that dream felt like a cruel joke. Standing in our kitchen, bank statements in hand, the reality hit me hard. Our account, once steadily growing with every sacrifice and saved penny, was empty. I felt like the floor had given way beneath me. When Ethan walked through the door that evening, I was waiting, the bank statements still clutched in my hands. Ethan, where's our money? Our account is empty. All those years of saving. What happened? He just shrugged, a nonchalant gesture that fueled my growing anger. Needed it for some urgent stuff. Don't worry about it. Urgent stuff? I shot back, my voice rising. That was our future, Ethan. Was it for her? For your mistress and her kid? The accusation hung heavy in the air between us. Ethan's face went pale, his usual confident demeanor faltering. How did you know about that? Without a word, I slammed the photos on the table in front of him, pictures of him with another woman, their intimacy undeniable, and a child that bore a striking resemblance to him. His expression crumbled, the truth laid bare between us. This is where our dreams went, Ethan? To another family? My voice broke, the pain and betrayal slicing through me. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to fail him. The man I had married, the one who shared my dreams, was a stranger now, his choices unraveling the life we had built together. I'd hired a private investigator after months of doubts, and the findings were as clear as day. The moment I learned the truth about where he was during my mom's funeral, everything clicked. He wasn't at work, he was with her, his mistress. I've known about your cheating for a while, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. Hired a PI. Saw you with her, on the day we buried my mom. You weren't at work. Ethan laughed, a sound that once brought me joy now filled with mockery. I've been wanting to end this for a long time, he admitted with a coldness that cut deeper than his words. I was just waiting for you to get your inheritance. Guess there's no reason to wait now. His confession was a slap in the face, but it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. You're leaving, but not with my money, I declared with a newfound strength. I informed him of my decision to file for divorce and demanded the return of the money he'd taken from our account, money we'd saved together for a future that was now in ruins. He didn't argue, just packed his stuff and left with a smug look that made me want to scream. The moment the door slammed shut, I called my lawyer, my hands trembling, but my voice clear. I'm filing for divorce. He's drained our account for his needs. I want that money back. The lawyer was optimistic, a small comfort. You've got a strong case. Gather all your evidence, photos, bank statements, everything. We'll go after him for every penny. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of clarity. The man I had married, the life we had built together, was gone. But in its place was a chance for a new beginning, one where I could rebuild on my own terms, without deceit or betrayal shadowing my steps. The courtroom was charged with tension, a silent battlefield where eyes did most of the talking. When it was finally time to face off, Ethan couldn't even look me in the eye. The judge's gavel might as well have been the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. You're ordered to return half the savings from the joint account, the judge declared, his voice firm and devoid of sympathy for the man on the other side of the courtroom. Additionally, you'll compensate for your deceitful actions. Sitting across from him, I could barely contain a triumphant smile. It wasn't about the money, it was about accountability. Looks like the truth's out, isn't it? I couldn't help but whisper across the aisle during a recess. He just scoffed, a hollow sound devoid of his usual bravado. Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts. He shot back, his voice a mix of bitterness and resignation. The verdict was a clear victory, a sign that justice had indeed been served. As I walked out of the courtroom, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was finally free from the chains of a marriage built on lies. A week hadn't even passed when I heard a knock at my door, bold and demanding. There she stood, the other woman, bold as brass and twice as sharp. I'm here for my child. He deserves a share of whatever you got from your mother, she declared, chin up and eyes blazing with entitlement. I couldn't believe the audacity. After everything, this was her move? I let out a laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You've got some nerve, showing up here and demanding money. Your child isn't my responsibility, nor is he entitled to my mother's inheritance. She bristled at that, her stance aggressive. You owe us. He left us with nothing. The only thing I owe you is a call to the police if you don't get off my property, I retorted, my patience wearing thin. The threat seemed to pierce through her bravado, and with a huff, she turned on her heel and stormed off. Watching her leave, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, relief, but above all, a sense of closure. The door to my past was finally closing, and I could now look towards rebuilding my life, on my own terms. With the legal battle behind me and the last of the unwelcome visitors gone, I realized that this was more than just a win in court. It was a reclaiming of my life and my dignity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it head-on, with a clear heart and a newfound strength. Months had passed since the trial, and the dust had finally settled. I thought I had closed the chapter on my ex-husband and the pain he'd caused. So, when my phone rang and his name flashed on the screen, a storm of emotions whirled inside me. Curiosity, more than anything, led me to accept his offer to meet. We chose a neutral spot, a small cafe that held no memories for either of us. I arrived first, choosing a table in the corner where I could see the door. When Ethan walked in, looking nervously around until his eyes landed on me, a part of me I thought was long buried felt a twinge of something. It wasn't love or longing, just a recognition of our shared past. Ethan complimented me immediately. You look amazing, as always. His voice held a note of sincerity I hadn't heard in years. Thanks, I replied, my tone neutral. So, what's this about? He hesitated, then took a deep breath. I'm alone now, he began, his gaze dropping. She left me, took everything, and now I'm drowning in alimony for our kid. I listened quietly, my expression unreadable. I had imagined countless things he might want to say to me, but this confession wasn't one of them. He rushed on. I've had a lot of time to think, about us, about everything. I know I messed up, but I've changed. I miss you. I still love you. I was thinking, dreaming really, that maybe we could try again. Start a family. His words hung in the air between us, a fragile hope in his eyes. But all I felt was a deep, resounding clarity. You're dreaming, all right, I said, a laugh escaping me. It wasn't cruel, just incredulous. After everything, you honestly believe we can just pick up where we left off? Ethan looked deflated but nodded. I know it's a lot to ask, but yes. I really believe we could make it work. I can't trust you, I said firmly, the laughter gone. Not after everything. I don't even understand how I ever fell for you in the first place. He tried to interrupt, to convince me, but I held up a hand. No. It's over. It was over the moment you chose someone else over your family, over us. I've moved on. I'm happy, truly happy. And you should try to find that happiness too, but it won't be with me. Standing up, I left him sitting there, a mix of regret and realization dawning on his face. As I walked away, a sense of freedom enveloped me. This meeting, this final closure, was the last step in letting go of a past that no longer held me. I stepped out into the sunlight, ready to embrace whatever came next, proud of the woman I had become through the trials I had faced. Life took on a new hue after everything settled down. Receiving my mother's inheritance was bittersweet. It was a reminder of her absence, but also of her love and the values she instilled in me. Remembering the long days she spent in the hospital, I decided to pay it forward. A significant portion of the inheritance went to a charitable foundation dedicated to improving patient care in hospitals. It felt right, like it was what she would have wanted. My days at the dental clinic were as fulfilling as ever. Helping people smile a little brighter gave me a sense of purpose and continuity. Occasionally, snippets of news about Ethan would find their way to me, painting a picture of a life spiraling out of control. Debts, it seemed, had become a constant in his life, a relentless shadow from which he couldn't escape. I won't lie and say there was no part of me that felt vindicated, but gloating over someone's misfortune, especially someone I once shared my life with, felt wrong. I preferred to think of it as the universe balancing the scales, giving out what was deserved, nothing more. Recently, life threw me a curveball, but this time it was a pleasant surprise. At a dental symposium, I reconnected with a colleague I'd only known in passing before. Our casual conversations during the conference revealed a shared passion for vintage rock music, hiking, and, surprisingly, an affinity for spicy food that could make even the bravest souls weep. We started dating not long after, finding comfort in our shared interests and in the understanding that only those who have experienced similar life trials can offer. One evening, over dinner at a cozy restaurant that had become our favorite haunt, he asked me, "How do you manage to stay so positive after everything you've been through?" I paused, considering his question. I guess I realized that holding on to bitterness is like letting someone else live rent-free in your head. Moving on, it's not just about forgetting the past, but about making peace with it. He nodded, a look of admiration in his eyes. I admire that about you. It's not easy. Smiling, I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. Life's too short to dwell on what could have been. It's about what could be. As we left the restaurant, walking hand in hand under the starlit sky, I felt a sense of peace and anticipation for the future. Life was moving on, and so was I, carrying the lessons of the past and the hope for tomorrow. And so, as this chapter of my life closes and a new one begins, I carry with me the strength and wisdom gained from trials faced, knowing that whatever comes my way, I'll face it with a smile. Just like my mother taught me.